Is it better to complete all of your rotations or not? In this video, I'm going to do a comparison based on a discussion I previously had with one of my seniors about whether you should complete all of your rotations before you consider climbing up to another band, if you're speaking of the NHS, or just climbing into another position, or whether, in my stance, you should complete certain ones and then you're open to do as much as you like. Okay, so I'm just going to start with the rotational side of things, because most people tend to go for rotations and quite a few people are unsure whether they should complete them all or not. So if you don't know, I'm a rotational physiotherapist. At my trust we had about 6 different rotations covering, we've got MSK, the complex medicine, so elderly care, A&E, pediatrics, orthopedics, and neuro and respiratory. So we cover all of those areas. Some hospitals have more, some hospitals have less. But anyway, so based off this discussion we're having with the senior, I was having a debate whether I wanted to go to certain areas in rotation wise, or whether I just want to stop at a certain point. They were advocating that when they were training, that you typically completed all of your rotations before you even considered something else. I've got down some reasons as to why you should complete all rotations, and I've also got down my reasons for it. At the end, I'll let you know what side I'm on, or if I've got a side. But firstly, so a reason to complete all of your rotations is that it can help you figure out where you want to go. Sometimes people pick rotations because they generally have no idea where they want to specialize. I personally picked rotations because I had a rough idea where I want to specialize, but I didn't want to narrow down immediately. So I was like, rotations would be a good way to get those little bits of knowledge that I never got to get, and those exposures that I never got to get as a student. So that's why I went for it. Other people do it for other reasons, but basically it can help you find out where you want to go. Another good thing about rotations and completing all of your rotations is that it will help you be a well-rounded therapist. Obviously by that, let's say for example, I went to a rotation I'm not too keen on. Even though I'm not keen on doing the rotation, you could argue, well, it's not really you could argue, I would still develop skills and knowledge that I wouldn't have had, or may not have had, if I didn't go there. And basically you'd have to search it up yourself. For example, let's say I don't want to go back to ortho, which I don't want to go back to ortho, but you could argue that even though I did ortho as a student, my exposure to ortho as a therapist will be different to how I was. As a student, I'll still learn more skills, I'll learn more depth and things, even though I personally feel like I'm like, about it. It can be argued, well, you went in here with this mindset and now you come up with all this extra knowledge, which you can then take away and take elsewhere to help you be better in another area. So that's the argument on that side. The next point was more insight and knowledge. Yeah, some people will argue, well, you signed up for a rotational post, so why not complete all the rotations? Which is a fair point, but I think it's really dependent on the individual's wants and needs. The other point is networking. Now, that really depends on what your plans are. So yes, in terms of you get to know all the other therapists in all the other areas, you get to know how things work in other areas. For example, let's say if you're short-staffed and one team needs to send someone from another team, they tend to pick the person who's been on that team, had exposure to on that team, whether it's shadowing or had done a rotation in it, because obviously they know how things work. If you need help, it's just you don't want to be teaching at that time, so people can argue that. Also, if you just need anything in general, not necessarily like helping support a team, but if you need to reach out to anybody, at least you know who you're contacting. You develop some form of relationship, and if you plan on staying within your trust that you started your career in and climbing up, then it's always nice to get those little bits of foundations around and develop that rapport, that relationship very early on in your career, so people can like see that growth with you versus coming in as someone new. So that's an argument for that. But moving on to my points as to why I think, now when I speak about against the idea of like completing all of your rotations, it's literally like once you get to a point where you know where you want to go, and not like, well, you know, I only want to do 3 rotations and I'm out. Like, it's more just like, once you've figured out where you want to go, these are my points of that. So one of my points is, once you figure out where you want to go, why continue? If I knew I want to be a respiratory therapist, because I'm currently on respiratory, if I know that's what I want, and a job opens up, why would I then continue to rotate in all these other areas that I know I have no desire of going into? But you could also argue that, well, how would you know you have no desire if you haven't experienced them? Fair point, but each their own. Another point I have is, again, job situation. If the job popped up in an area that you want a job in, are you then going to say to yourself, okay, I'm not going to apply because I haven't completed all of my rotations? Or are you going to say to yourself, I'm going to apply despite not completing all of my rotation, and if I get it, I get it. If I don't, I don't. It's either way, it's a learning experience. So there's different ways of saying it. Some people would be like, I wouldn't even consider looking at a higher banding job until I've completed all areas. Speaking of that, you could also argue you could complete all rotations and still not know where you want to go. It's like people completing university and still not knowing what they want to do. So it's, anyway, another reason why I'm a bit like, about it is that sometimes I feel like if you, not only do if you know where you want to go, but like if you have a rough inkling and you have good support in your trust and good like seniors, you can always speak to them about what your career path is and speak to them based off like, okay, I've worked with you personally, what do you think I am capable of doing? Like, I have this rough idea, do you think that's a good idea based off what you know about me? Things like that. It can help guide you, because sometimes what you think works for you and someone may see how you work from the outside and non-biased perspective and be like, actually, I'm not saying don't go for it, but what I'm saying is you have these attributes that will be beneficial in another area, but if you do wish to go for this, this is things you can work on. So you can see it in that sense. I see it more in terms of like, for example, I sat down with my senior and I was like, this is where I think I want to specialize if I'm going to stay within this trust. So for me personally, for my growth, I feel like I need said rotations to get me there. The good thing is, I think, I'm not sure if this is with every trust, my trust gives you the opportunity to put in your preferences before you get put into certain rotations. So you give over 2 preferences, you put your first preference, your top one, and your second preference. You don't necessarily get asked to give a reason as to why you want them. This time around I chose to give a reason because I understand that obviously I'm going to be put wherever the service needs me, which I'm fine to do, but I'm also like, you know, I've come here knowing roughly what I want to do. I might as well try and tailor things as much as possible. So I think that's definitely something to look into and consider when it comes to if you complete all of them or if you shouldn't complete all of them. And another reason that why people may not complete all rotations once they know what they want to do is money as well. Because don't get me wrong, compared to some other countries and everything else, the pay is crap in the UK. So kind of just like, if you have the opportunity or if you have the insight that, well, you feel like you have the insight to go for something in the area that you want to go into, but you haven't completed, let's say you completed 1 rotation, because there's been people who've completed 1 rotation, found where they want to go because they've hit the jackpot immediately and they've climbed immediately and they're like, hey, I'm getting paid to do what I love rather than going around in other areas. And my argument in terms of going around in the other areas once you already know is there's some areas, some specialities that take on less people because the service can't handle that many band 5s there at a time. You're then putting up, like taking up a spot for someone who really, really wants it. Like in school, I would say like sports was the very popular one that everybody wanted, everyone wanted MSK. I knew from the jump I didn't want that, so I was always like to uni, hey, don't waste your time putting me in those 2 areas because I know it's competitive, there's going to be a lot of people lining up for these rotations. Like, no, put it on someone who deserves it and who desires it, not somebody who's just going to be there and do it. Not saying I wouldn't work, and I'm sure I'd learn things from it, but I'd be a bit half-assed on it. But anyway, yeah, let me know what you think on it. It's a bit of an interesting debate. I do see both sides of it. I see the benefits and the pros and the cons to like doing it all or not doing it all, but I really think it's like an individual choice. And something that some people, like myself, I went in with the mindset knowing that I wasn't going to complete all, and I don't intend on completing all. But if it came to it and I did complete all, I wouldn't be mad at the end. I wouldn't be like, oh god, I've wasted months. But like, is that going to stop me? Basically, it won't stop me from looking for something else. But yeah, let me know what you think down in the comments. I'll catch you guys in another video where we compare some other things. And yeah, see ya.